For our second Megatrends dive of the day, please welcome Skift Global Tourism reporter Lebawit Girma.
Welcome back, everybody. So now we're going to talk about global tourism. Tourism is coming back, yes, but in a transformed world, to say the least. Huge shifts at the economic and social levels. And what you'll see as I present the next 4 tourism trends for 2022 is an underlying theme of transparency, a heightened scrutiny, if you will, of how the industry will be affected. And of course, these also present huge opportunities on the way to building back better and more sustainably. So let's dive right in. Host communities are finally becoming a key partner for destination management organizations. Tourism boards' local first approach appears to be here to stay. Of course, that's because public health is going to remain a safety issue and a top of the agenda for some time to come. Consumers are also looking for places that are authentic and that are welcoming and safe to them. So as a result, we're seeing the resident sentiment survey emerging as a necessary key performance indicator coming out of the downturn. Of course, places like Hawaii have been using this for quite a long time. But it's not just these cyclical inputs that DMOs are now doing. They're also reaching out to local businesses and to host communities for their input on their marketing campaigns. And as a result, we've seen a huge step up in the last year alone in the diversity and inclusivity of messaging, even from places you wouldn't expect, such as Boston.
Boston. It's the city you know. The city of history. The city of champions. But we are also a city of people.
This focus on people, of course, is an attempt to show that DMOs are placing residents ahead of outside visitors. And you're probably wondering, well, is that enough? These are questions that we ask ourselves often as Skift reporters. Is this for real? Well, relationships take time to build. Broken relationships take time to repair as well. And what we do believe is that this new level of transparency is going to require that DMOs go way beyond the surface level sentiment surveys and beyond the diverse marketing to show that they are really listening to their communities and really serving a community need. That's because we're seeing historic pushback globally. This is a report on world protests from the last 2 decades, and you can see how it's been just ascending incredibly, this is up to 2020, but the authors of this report believe that it's going to continue. It's certainly going to affect the tourism industry. There's talk of a social license to operate. Businesses, since the pandemic, have to not only coordinate with local authorities, but they also now have to feel it out and see if the community wants them back. And in some cases, they don't. There's talk of the decolonization of travel. Definitely not a new conversation, but there are a few DMOs that are really looking ahead to the future and tapping into this conscious consumer trend to reinvent the way that they sell tourism. Panama is a great example, actually integrating community-based tourism into their sustainable tourism plan to put their money where their mouth is and fund communities to train and be part of the overall offering, and also pressuring the private sector to come along for the ride. Of course, there are CEOs who are sitting there thinking, well, I need to get out of this economic downturn first, and the host communities are a second priority. But we believe that they will be pushed into considering these 2 questions, which have now intensified. What is the true cost of tourism? And what are the benefits for your host communities? And if you're still skeptical, this next megatrend surely points in that direction as well. The ruralization of travel. This intense desire to get outdoors was accelerated during the pandemic, and now it's just intensified. If you see this map from data intelligence platform Arrivalist, the green highlighted states there in the US have seen astronomical increases in road trips and outdoor exploration, way beyond 2019 levels. And so, it's not just in the US, obviously, or in Canada. It's a global phenomenon. Dragon Trail research firm just announced last week that the major trend for China last year was glamping. And as you can see, it's a completely fully catered experience. Huge opportunities here for startups and for other segments of the tourism industry, including host communities that surround these areas. And that's why you see a new program from the United Nations World Tourism Organization. They've launched a vetted list of 40+ villages in 30-something countries that are examples of how tourism can push for equity as well as spread the benefits among host communities. Of course, with this rural push and venturing into secondary cities brings a whole host of problems, and we believe it is setting the stage for a new kind of over-tourism. This was already being discussed in the United States at the government level last year, and this will intensify moving forward. So the question, of course, is, how will the travel industry tap into these opportunities, but also address and innovate to alleviate these pressures on the environment and on surrounding populations? And we believe that they will need to go for hyper-local marketing, such as this message from Moab, Utah.
I remember the first time Taylor brought me to Moab. It was life-changing. I think that switch from caring to loving to respecting, it's about being mindful, being aware of what's going to help versus what's going to harm.
What's going to help and what's going to harm. Of course, it's more than hyper-local marketing. We will need, new technology and infrastructure to address these pressures. But again, what role is the industry going to play? That points to the next megatrend, the age of supermobility. People aren't just moving to rural areas in their own backyards. We're seeing an increase in these combined marketing campaigns from around the world. The whole world is on the move for so many reasons, right? So if you see these destinations ranging from Scotland to Western Australia to Montserrat, inviting people to, yes, come and work here remotely, but also you could invest, you could live here, and so it's an incredible time, and we believe that it's setting the stage for travel's ferocious comeback. But what's interesting is that this is happening at a time of extreme inequality around the world as a result of the pandemic. And I think that a good way to look at it is, let's not talk about the global poverty rate right now, because it's probably going to be lost on most of us. But what we do relate to is the Henley Passport Index, aka passport privilege. Global freedom is at the highest level it's ever been for passport holders from Europe, North America, Asia. Even United Arab Emirates has shut up, in terms of where people can go without a visa. But the authors of this index have also found that we are now seeing the widest recorded global mobility gap since they created this index 17 years ago. And I think that Brian Chesky really hit the nail on the head when he said the following at Skift Global Forum.
I think we in the travel industry and the tech industry have to make sure that we're part of the solution, not the problem. Because the promise of travel is freedom and flexibility. The downside is, when you can hire people from anywhere, people can get left behind.
So there's a huge opportunity here, again, in this mega trend. But at the same time, will the travel industry help bridge and narrow this gap or widen it between those who can move around the planet at will and those who either lack the digital tools, lack the right training, or even the right vaccine to hop around the planet? Speaking of hopping around the planet, climate is finally a major priority for the travel industry. 2021 saw huge progress in terms of commitments that are being made. Now, of course, climate action isn't new, right? But it's a new level of urgency, a new level of transparency and accountability that is being required. And investors, shareholders, consumers will be demanding specific action, and they want to see the steps that tourism industry and tourism businesses are taking. And all of these segments of travel have launched initiatives and made promises, the most significant of which the Glasgow Declaration. Hopefully in the next 12 months, we'll see upwards of 300+ tourism climate action plans being filed. and hopefully many more to come. Of course, the aviation sector is the most, the one that everyone focuses on the most and shames the most. But there's effort being made there too. The International Air Transport Association has said that they will release soon proposed standards for emissions reporting, for example. But it's a lot more than that, isn't it? And what we're seeing is really a realization that climate resilience is the new return on investment. Here is Sébastien Bazin, CEO of Accor, who explains how his decision-making has shifted.
I was last week in the south of Europe, I won't tell you where, and I went by foot for 2.5 hours on the site. And that deal won't happen, because this is not a location in which is virgin land. We should not be sacrificing that land.
So you probably realize, as my colleague Matt Parsons explains in his Climate Megatrend, that the environmental damage far outweighs any benefits that might come from a new hotel at that precise location. So it's not about volume anymore. And what we're seeing really is an increase of green financing. Financing being provided for companies that are providing products, services that help improve the planet, right, and protect the planet. These are two recent examples from hospitality and aviation. Resorts are getting pre-certified and then branding themselves as sustainable. In aviation too, the first sustainability-linked loan tied to ESG metrics. So yes, the world is watching, but it's not just about the world is watching, because they've been watching for a long time. It's really more that the bottom lines are going to be impacted moving forward. Everyone remembers this image from the Foreign Affairs Minister of Tuvalu, standing in the rising sea level waters of his island nation, saying, "No more speeches, we want action." And this will be the same requirement and the same challenge that will meet the travel industry this year, to show that it's much more than greenwashing and to be specific in their actions. So these are the 4 megatrends I've talked to you today for global tourism: community, ruralization, mobility, and climate. Don't forget to download the full publication for more details, and thank you for listening.